I'm going to talk about a topic today that's near and dear to my heart because I have a son that's approaching the 20s. And I see the 20s as an incredibly important and really difficult, especially in today's day and age, time in a young man's life. Because it's a time where he's transitioning from being a student to being a producer in the world. And he's trying to find his place. And in the world that we live in today, we have so many things that remind us of all the success people are having in their life, whether that's your peers or it's your parents or it's the adults that your parents hang out with. And it's very easy for young men today to start to compare themselves to the successes that men in their 30s, 40s, and 50s have spent decades achieving and comparing themselves to it now. Picture the kid who's laying at home on his bed after coming home, maybe just getting back from college after his junior year, and he's scrolling through Instagram and he's seeing one friend after the next who's got a new job and is super excited about it, or one of his friends has started a company and the company's achieving success, and he's got another friend who just looks like he's got shit figured out. Not that any of those things are true, but they're the highlight reel of what's true in other people's lives. And he starts to inadvertently compare himself to the status of these other people, his peers. And especially when he feels like he doesn't have it all figured out yet. And by the way, spoiler alert, you're not supposed to have it figured out when you're in your 20s yet. It's what your 20s are for. And then he starts to look at his father, who happened to have a successful business or start something that was the beginning of his career that led to a ton of success when he was in his 20s. And he's inadvertently creating lack inside of himself. He's inadvertently creating a gap between where he is now and where he thinks he should be now. Like, I should be further along. I should have this figured out. I should know what I want to do. I should have already achieved a certain level of success in my life. I should have already produced something. I mean, look at me. I'm 23 years old and I haven't produced anything. And that kid starts to withdraw, starts to lose confidence, to go inward. It's never something that they share. I mean, who would want to share that? How bad they feel about themselves. And even if it's not terrible yet, they don't share it with their friends because they're comparing themselves with their friends. They don't share it with their parents because they think they're stupid for having those feelings. And their parents, I mean, especially if their dad has been a successful entrepreneur or a business owner or whatever in their life, like, that just feels silly. And so they struggle with it alone, feel unseen, feel like there's no one to share it with. And it's not a coincidence that we have so much mental health challenge in this world right now with young men. And it's no coincidence that a failure to launch is such at epic proportions in today's young men. I mentioned young men measuring themselves, right? They're measuring themselves with a measuring stick or a ruler that it's not appropriate for this time of their life. And it's the wrong ruler. He's using metrics that are all around us all the time. financial success and popularity and how many followers do you have and how many things have you produced that other people have liked. You know, it reminds me of the way a young musician could judge themselves for not having a hit record by the time they're 22 years old. I mean, think about that. The process of becoming is the process of life. You know, there are very few people who are 18 years old like Bob Dylan and who know their sound if they're a musician. They develop their sound over years and years of experimentation and practice and doing scales and playing in other bands and playing for other people. And it takes years to develop who it is you're going to be and what you're going to create. One of my favorite books is Steal Like an Artist, right? I mean, artists steal from each other all the time. It's not really stealing. They're using that material to build their repertoire, their own chops, in order to then develop the sound that's going to be their contribution. But they don't make their contribution very often at a really young age. When you start to judge yourself that way, it produces shame, it produces paralysis, it produces withdrawal. As a coach, I have clients who've been running this operating system since their 20s, who've been judging their success based on their production, and who have not spent the time in their 20s experimenting and practicing and failing and learning all the lessons that you need to learn in order to develop the inner substance of yourself and your life, so that by the time you turn 40 or 50, you've got a solid foundation and you're not still chasing your tail. Trust me, when you're in your 40s or 50s and you're still chasing your tail, then you've got to go back and rejigger and refigure that out. It's not so easy and not so much fun. There's a famous philosopher, Alan Watts, who one of the favorite analogies that he makes is how life is like a piece of music or a dance, and how music is this incredible experience where the joy is in the experience of the music, in experiencing of the music. And the joy of watching a dance or participating in a dance is in doing the dance, learning how to do the dance, learning the steps, spending the hours in rehearsal, learning the discipline that it takes to create that level of expertise in whatever it is you're going to perform. And in watching a piece of music being performed, the joy is in watching it. It's not in hurrying up and get to the end. You know, and today's young men are judging themselves on their end point while they're still in the process of developing who it is that they are in their 20s. It would be like judging the piece of music based on how quickly you can get to the end. Imagine watching Thriller, and the best version of Thriller is the one that only takes 45 seconds to get to the end of, as opposed to like 6 minutes. Or Freebird, like the best recording of Freebird ever is the one that takes 2 minutes. It's ludicrous, right? Judging the outcome as opposed to judging the joy of the journey. When I think of those 20-something years, the confusion that comes in the 20-something years. Is this the right thing for me? Do I have a good boss? How do I get along with my employees, with my coworkers? How do I get myself to show up when I don't really want to show up? What happens when I don't show up repeatedly? What are the consequences of the actions that I'm taking in my life? There's so many lessons that are so juicy in your 20s that you need to build on who you're becoming for your 30s and your 40s. Skipping it doesn't work. I had some experiences when I was in my 20s simply because of my experience in the Marine Corps. I remember one of my early ones, I thought I was hot shit. And I'd done really well going through officer candidate school. I was a newly commissioned second lieutenant. Here I am at the basic school. I'd done a lot of work with weapons in up until that point. And I thought my word was gold. I knew how to do all this stuff. So they issued us our M16s and they told us to lock them with a cable lock to our racks, our beds. They would never have done that today. But back then that was okay. And we locked them up and they said, make sure they're secure, and it was a combination lock, the kind you turn. And they gave us like 3 minutes to do it. So we went in, locked them up, ran back out, got into formation. And about 5 minutes later, our platoon commander comes walking out of the barracks holding an M16, one M16, had a bayonet attached to the top of it. And he gets out in front of the platoon and he turns the weapon and he reads the serial number. I don't remember what the serial number was. And I heard the serial number and I felt my stomach start doing backflips. Whose weapon is this? I'm going to read it one more time. And he reads it one more time. And my stomach drops into my throat. I feel sick. I feel my knees start to buckle. And then he takes the weapon, turns it over, throws it down, bayonet down into the dirt. So it's stuck in the dirt. He goes, come get your weapon and secure it. And I had to run out in front of 40 some odd young men, grab it and secure it properly to my rack. I mean, it was the biggest piece of humble pie I ever remember experiencing. And, it occurs to me that was an incredible lesson for me in my 20s. I had other incredibly important lessons that I learned in my 20s when I was in the Marine Corps. Leadership by example. You can't fake it. Like if you want your Marines to follow you somewhere, you've got to be able to lead them by the example that you set. I got a great understanding of the word integrity and what it means to be your word so that you not only honor what you say, but other people know that you're count-onable. They can always count on you because it's what you said you're going to do. And another really important thing that I learned in the Marine Corps was I learned that I could do what I thought was impossible. Like I was always, in spite of what my mind might have told me, I was always capable of doing a little bit more. I learned that repeatedly over and over and over and over again. Now, these were all things that I didn't learn from the book. I learned by example. I learned by doing them. And this is what your 20s are for. These early years in your 20s, they're not the waiting room. They're not the sideshow. They're the whole game. They're the prize. They're the curriculum. They're the things that are the joys of life, even though in the moment they might suck and they might not feel like success. If you're the parent or the coach or the mentor or the friend of someone that you see struggling in their 20s, or you suspect they might be struggling in their 20s, see if you can help remind them that the ruler they're using to judge themselves by is just the wrong ruler at the wrong time. And if you're not the right person to do that, because very often it's hard to give your own kid that kind of advice, they stop listening, especially if you're the uber successful father or mother that has set the world on fire and they're judging themselves based on your success. Get them in front of somebody who can. Get them in front of a mentor. Get them in front of a coach. It's one of the growing areas of my practice, working with 20-somethings who need to find this traction in their life and need to learn to be okay with who they are now, where they are now. Not because they need to get somewhere faster, but because it's where they're supposed to be right in this very minute. none of this is your fault if you are the parent. It's not like you're intentionally teaching this stuff. Our young men are utilizing the measuring sticks of the world and internalizing them in order to inadvertently find themselves at the short end of the stick. If you're one of these young men, just know you're not broken, you're not behind. There's nothing wrong. You haven't missed a thing. You're just early in the music. It's going to take some practice to remember, to find this acceptance for yourself for where you are. But I promise you can get there. The music doesn't get better by rushing to the end. It gets better by learning to play each note and each chord fully, to experience this incredible dynamic rainbow of life. And guess what the most incredible notes are? The ones that are the hardest, the ones that feel like they're the wrong notes, the ones that feel like mistakes, because they become the fabric of your growth moving forward into where you're going. You're just beginning the journey. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. You got this.